Hi, I'm George Coffey, and I'm going to show you how to make a mask. This is based on a New York Times article and some instructions from Mercy General Hospital in Sacramento. The first thing you need is fabric. It should be 100% cotton and not like t-shirt material or really thin, but you want something more like a napkin, bandana type material. The one I have has birds on it. Can we get a close-up of the birds? There's snow in here. You also need something to secure it. I'm going to show you how to make fabric ties, but you can also use clean shoelaces or like a fabric ribbon. One good place to get fabric ribbon is the handles of fancier shopping bags. But you're not supposed to go shopping now, so that's going to be tough to get those. You can also use elastic, but I think that that's more trouble than it's worth. If you use elastic, you can't use bleach on it because the bleach will slowly destroy the elastic. And most elastic will trigger latex allergies. So for those reasons, you can't really donate ones with elastic to hospitals. And even if you're making this for yourself, it's tough to measure the elastic to get it the right tension. You might sew it all together and then realize it's too loose or too tight and have to like take it apart and redo it. Or if you're making this for someone else and like maybe they have like a giant like weird big head and you have like a weirdly kind of like small little head, and so like you measure it on you and like then you give it to them and you want to be like nice and you're like, oh, just thought you could use a mask, and then they're like, is this a fucking joke? Like, are you trying to fuck with, like, I understand I have a big head, like you don't need to rub it in right now. Like now is not the time to spend all day making a mask that like won't even fit and like give it to me just to like make me feel like I'm out of a job. I don't need this. And you're like, I swear that's not what I was doing. And you're like, oh, really? Weird, because this doesn't fit at all. Like, it's just going to pull at my ears all day and give me like a headache. And then you're like, it's going to be an awfully big headache. And then they're like, you know what? That's it. We're done. I'm moving out. So you can do that if you want to do that. You can do that. But I would just use fabric ties. I'm going to show you how to make fabric ties, but if you already have like ribbon or something, you can just skip to 6 minutes 40 or something like that. End of the video. To make the ties, we need 4 pieces of fabric, each 18 inches long by 1 inch wide. The New York Times article says 3/4 of an inch wide, but that gets really hard to fold them that small. So I think 1 inch is good. You could even do 1.5 inches just to make it a little easier. I already cut this piece of fabric 18 inches long, so now I'm just going to mark off 1 inch widths with this little piece of chalk. Now it's easy just to put a crease with an iron where you're going to cut just a light crease. That also lets you just fold this over and over to make them all similar. If you put too heavy of a crease, it's going to be a little harder to cut. Maybe I'll speed this up and you'll have that fun little like speed up noise. Now that you have the 4 strips, you need to fold them over and give them a crease like that. And then you're going to fold each half into itself. This is why the New York Times one, the 3/4 of an inch, is tricky because this is really hard to do with only 3/4 of an inch. Once you have both sides folded in, you want to fold it in half again. So you end up with the 2 sides together like that. And here's where it helps to pin this. Take a pin. And that's 1 down, 3 to go. Because these ties are so narrow, sometimes it's hard for the machine to grab them the right way. So I've found that if you start with just the end like this, and then sew it like this, you can then spin it around and sew the whole thing a lot more easily. For the main part of the mask, you need 2 pieces of fabric that are 9.5 inches by 6.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and measure. This piece is about 6.5. I'm just going to measure there and square this off. And then measure 9.5. It's about to there. So I'm going to cut along here. Now these pieces don't have to be perfectly exact, but they should match each other very well. You might want to just kind of line them up, flip them back and forth, and just check to make sure one of them isn't bigger than the other in a certain side, because it's going to make it a lot easier when you sew them together. Now that you have your ties and your 2 pieces of fabric, we're going to start to put this together. So take one of the pieces of fabric and lay it with the pattern side up. And we're going to take these ties and just kind of make them into little bundles. You can do this a number of different ways. Here I'm going to use a safety pin. You can also use just some blue painter's tape, which is what I'm going to do here. Just wrap this up. Or you could use regular pins, but I don't want to stab myself with them. So I'm going to keep using safety pins, because I think that's the easiest way to go. Once you have them all bundled up, you need to lay them out facing inwards, one on each corner. Just for aesthetic reasons, you might want to take the seams and just line them up to face the outside edges. Once you have them all bundled up like this, you want to line them up to the top, just about 1/4 of an inch in, and right up to the edge on this side, and just put a pin to tack them in place. It's probably best to put the pin facing in with the head of the pin on the inside. That's going to make it a lot easier to pull it out later. Also found it's helpful to put some blue painter's tape like this, because you want them You want them lined up square along here, but you want them to curl in so that you don't accidentally sew into them when you're sewing across the top. So I'm just going to do that. You also don't want to get this tape too close to the edge because you don't want to sew through that either. Once you have them all pinned and taped down if you want, take the other piece of fabric, make sure it's also upright, matching this one, and put that, making a little sandwich pocket. And this also helps if you line it up as well as you can on each corner and pin it in place. The better you line it up, the better it's going to work in the end, leaving the inside like a little pocket. Try to get the two sides lined up as well as possible, so especially so that the corners match. Now that you have it all pinned, you want to sew about 1/4 of an inch in all the way around. However, you want to make sure to leave either at the top or at the bottom about 1 inch opening. So you sew from about here all the way around and back to here, leaving 1 inch space to pull everything back through. So I'm going to start right on the edge, and here I'm just using the presser foot to set a width of about 1/4 of an inch. Make sure as you sew along the side that you don't inadvertently start sewing into the strap that's underneath until you get to the edge. You only want to sew it here, not along here. When you get to where you're going to sew over the tie, you might want to, actually no, you don't need to do that. When you get to each corner where the tie is, just go a little slower because that pin that's holding the tie is still under there, and if you slam into it with the needle, it might not like it. So just go a little slow. Make sure you're getting that tie pretty solidly. You can see in the light here that those stitches went right through it. You can see I haven't gotten to the tie yet, so now that I turn the fabric sideways and I'm about to sew over the tie. Now that I'm getting back to where I started, I'm going to leave this inch or so opening and take the fabric out. Now, take the pins out. Now we're going to flip this right side out. So find the opening that you left. Start to pull things back through. The tape should come off pretty easily. One thing that you might want to do first, just so you don't poke yourself, is find each of the pins that was holding the ties in place. Just try to pull those out first. Should be one in each corner. And start pulling the ties back through. You can actually use the tie to help you pull the material through. Just be careful not to rip up that opening unnecessarily. And there we go. Now if you did this right, each tie should be pretty even against the edge. If the tie's a little bit off and a little bit diagonal, that's fine. You can sometimes rip a stitch right at the top there to get it more square, but you don't really have to worry about that. Now that you've turned it inside out, go ahead and just iron it as flat as possible. Now once you have it nice and flat, fold it in half, but leave about a 1/2 inch overlap and give it a nice hard crease. Then fold it forward, leaving about a 1/2 inch. Now for the top section, do the same thing, folding it in half, but leaving a little bit of an overflow, overlap, whatever you want to call it. Give that a crease. And fold it back again. Once again, leaving that little bit of overlap. Now, do that same thing again for the bottom. And once again, leave. In this case, you can kind of just line the bottom up together. It's almost like you're folding it over to have these two line up. And then back one last time, leaving that same little fold of, it's almost like a paper fan you see along the edge. Make sure you never have 4 layers on this side. You only just want loop, loop, loop. You don't want these to be ever to overlap all the way. Once you have it like this, give it a really good press. Now, take some pins and pin in these folds. Now, for the final step, we're going to sew 2 stitches. One right along the edge, pretty much, on all 4 sides. And then one about 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch inside the other one. I think it's easiest to sew the inner one first, as that'll let you pull these pins out and then do the final one a little more precisely, because right now these are a little curved. It'd be tough to get that outer one perfect. we're going to do the outer stitching. Put the presser foot in the same spot, but I'm going to do slightly over this time, more along the edge. Now, unfortunately, I just ran out of thread, so now when you do the final stitching, you'll get to your hole that you left, and you should be able to just stitch it shut. I actually missed it that time. Just make sure that you actually stitch over the hole so it gets stitched shut so it doesn't unravel. Now that that's done, you can take some scissors and just trim off excess loose threads from the beginning and the end of stitching. And you're all set. And now you have a mask. Make sure to wash the fabric before you use this mask. You can either wash the fabric before you stitch it together, or I think it's better to do it after you stitch it together, but make sure it gets washed once before you wear it out. And to put this on, put it over your nose and tie the ties behind your head. Make sure it's on your nose and under your chin. Now another quick tip with this mask, or with any mask for that matter, is when you put it on, spend a minute or so just feeling it before you go off into wherever you're going. Because you don't want to be halfway through shopping and realize it's like digging into you, or it's too tight in your nose, or it's too loose in your chin. Make sure with clean hands, just, adjust it, get it comfortable, take a few breaths, then go into the store and do whatever you need to do. And that's it.